came up and asked us to be sure. So I just took a note. Yeah. Yeah, we are. I'm ready. No, I just discovered it is not published. You say that so confident.
I happen to have an awareness.
Excellent. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. It's great to see everybody. I'd like to call this meeting to order, the Plymouth Congregational Church Annual Meeting of 2023. The first thing I'd like to do is ground us in our purposes of the church that we have established for quite a few years. We, the people of Plymouth Congregational Church, humbly seek and serve God within, among, and beyond ourselves. Within, we find sanctuary for our spiritual journey. In the congregational tradition, we seek the sacred in ourselves and all others. We cultivate our deepest and best selves. We nurture our capacity to love. We live in the hope of renewal and transformation. Among, we walk together in covenanted Christian community. We care for one another. We cultivate a spirit of gratitude, love, joy, compassion, and inclusion. We honor many pathways to the sacred. We deepen our understanding of our faith tradition. We nurture a welcoming culture to all. Beyond, God's creation benefits from our love lived out in the world. We invest our time, talent, and treasure consistent with our values. We serve people in need. We advance human rights. We further social, economic, racial, and environmental justice. We share our vision of progressive Christianity while respecting all faith traditions. The first thing I want to check on is to make sure that everybody has copies of the annual report. And is everybody okay? If not, we've got folks handing them out. I want to thank Elizabeth for putting these together. They're beautiful and easy to read. So thank you. Dwayne, if you could open us with a prayer.
We pray together. Merciful, loving, gracious God, thank you. Thank you for your presence with us. Thank you for your guiding spirit and your loving countenance. Thank you for bringing us to this moment in the life of this witness. We have gathered here as your people to do the work of the church, the business of this community. But we know that you are a God of love and grace and loving kindness, that the ways that we have been shaped by the doing of business often does not reflect the way you work. And so as we bring all of our gifts, issues, concerns, questions, hopes, dreams, desires, visions, hallow all of it as part of your wonder-working power. Bind what we say and do here as a part of heaven, as a part of the way you see us within your grace. Endow us with moral imagination, that we will appeal to the enduring wisdom that brings us closer together, that allows us to love each other and our neighbors more. Use us for your purposes, that our witness will go beyond these walls and announce good news to a world hungry for it. In your many names we pray. Amen.
Next, we need to establish a quorum before we get to any of the voting portions. Within our bylaws, a quorum is listed as greater than 50 members. So I'll ask, if you're a member, please raise your hand. Definitely more than 50 in the room. How many do we have online?
We have 38 attendees online.
Okay. A quorum has been established. We'd like to approve the minutes from last year's annual meeting. Do I have a motion on the floor? So moved. From Eric Olson. Do we have a second? From Elizabeth Glidden. Any discussion? Where? Oh,
I believe that is, we can check, I believe that is a leftover from the raising of hands of members that happened online.
whoever raised your hand online, can you chat and let us know? The beauties of hybrid meetings here.
The hand went down.
Okay, the hand went down.
There is a new, this hand, can you please say into the microphone, the hand raising function online is to be used to ask questions only, not identify a yes to a question.
So the hand raising function within Zoom should be used to raise your hand for a question. We will have voting available as a separate pop-up. So only use it to call attention to yourself, please. Okay, seeing no discussion, we'll raise the question. All in favor of approving last year's minutes from June 12th of 2022? In the room, please raise your hand for yes. Online, please vote. All opposed? All right, motion carries in the room unless we have something drastically different online.
So far it's 100% yeah.
Okay, excellent. Okay, let's move on to the reports. Dwayne, if you can give us our lead minister report, please.
I won't prolong this, I've been talking a lot, but I do want to just say from the minister's report here, last summer, there's some touchstones. Last summer, I think it was, I'm going to attribute it to you, Eric Olson. If it was not you, you can let me know afterwards. But in one of our meetings, someone closed out a meeting with the prayer that our strategic planning committee used for their strategic plan report, I think in 2010. And there were 3 phrases in there that I just could not let go of. And the prayer was for God to fire our imagination, strengthen our resolve, and deepen our faith. And that stuck with me. And then last fall, when we gathered in our leadership day, we were discussing things like what was emerging within our community. and also what were we dreaming, giving ourselves permission to dream. And I wanted to say that I think that everything that we've done this past program year has fit into those two touchstones for me. We have been imagining how to be a more loving and hospitable community, and we've been doing so in worship and programming. We've been strengthening our resolve. There have been many challenges that we are facing, that all churches are facing in a post-pandemic world. And we've been deepening our faith, and it's being shown in everything that we've done. And so I just want to take this opportunity to just thank you. Thank you for really showing up and redeeming the time. I am always surrounded by clergy and churches. We talk about what's going on. And the one thing I keep coming out, every time I come out of those conversations, I keep coming out of it thinking about how truly fortunate we are, how blessed we are. And I want to thank you. You have been an essential part of that emergence, that firing of the imagination, that strengthening of resolve. So every minute you volunteered, I thank you for every gift you have shared, however large or however small. I thank you for every service and every program you attended. I thank you for every visitor you greeted. I thank you for every social media post you made highlighting what we've done, for every witness you've given to the work of Plymouth Church. I thank you for it. I thank you because it speaks very loudly. And finally, I want to thank our staff. Thank you to a staff with creativity, imagination, hospitality. Just show up every day, every week, giving the very best of who they are, dreaming, always trying to find the way to do work better, to serve, to touch every person. I want to specifically call out Ann Gustafson, who this past year just really stepped up to so much coming at her. Transition in our financial systems, new things that we had to do with budgeting and finances, challenges of securing the building, given the changes that have been going on around us. And so I do want to lift her up. I want to thank Beth Hoffman Faith and Seth Patterson, who continue to bring the very best of their ministry, their faithfulness, their prayers for this church, this community, and for all of us to continue to do the work, staking it out and really working. I want to thank Philip Brunel for continuing to imagine and dream with us to bring to this community beauty in the form of our music and our worship service. I thank all of them. I close with you with this story. Just in the last 3 days, several things have happened that reminded me of who we are and what we're part of. On Thursday, I shared a plane ride to Washington, D.C. with Andrea Jenkins, the president of the Minneapolis City Council. And the first thing she said to me when we talked to each other was how very grateful she is to Plymouth Church. Grateful because we have been consistently present in the discussions of community safety, talking to the leaders in this city for bettering this city. And I was so grateful to hear that. She also thanked us for our Otis Moss event and how that was one of the best events, she said, that she has ever attended in Minneapolis. And I was bowled over in pride. And yesterday, Kareem and I went to the Golden Valley Pride celebration. And as we were walking through, to be honest with you, I was trying to find my friends. But every few steps, someone would stop me to tell me how Plymouth touched them in some way. I heard stories about getting married here. I heard stories about going to certain programs. I heard stories from the residents of Clare Housing about how many people come to worship here every Sunday. I heard people saying, "We need your help." about some issue every few steps, not to thank me or to congratulate me, but to just say how Plymouth Church played some part in their life. And that is a powerful witness, and I hope we remember it, because it brings me such joy to let you know it happened. God bless you.
Thank you, Dwayne. First, I want to just say thank you. It was mentioned in the bulletin, but thank you to everyone who participated last week in our What's at Stake session in preparation for the spiritual conversation about the votes that we're going to take today. The deacons have a responsibility to look forward. In the governing policies, we are listed as a visionary future orientation. That's what we need to have. We took that very seriously this year. We've worked very hard to understand the view of congregation, and in the fall we articulated a set of priorities that allowed us to find the direction Plymouth will take in the next 1 to 5 years. This is in my portion of the annual report, but I'm going to read them anyway. They align with our purposes. We want to explore within. Our church is a community of joy, imagination, and abundance, seeking the divine. We'll bring a sense of wonder and experimentation to our programs, volunteer work, and worship. Engage among. We create and sustain a strong congregational community by participating generously in the life of the church. We value relationships as a path to a stronger spiritual community, and make choices that allow us to engage with each other and with the community, and advocate beyond. We create and sustain a strong congregational community by participating generously in the life of the church. We value relationships as a path to a stronger spiritual community. Got off on my paragraph. We will carry our vision of community, love, and justice into the world, as Dwayne has mentioned. We will look for unjust systems, expose them, and address the injustices to the best of our ability. And while I'd love to take ownership of the creation of these, I really believe we just captured the priorities that are energizing what's happening here at Plymouth. Within the church, we saw this willing to explore, engage, and advocate show up in the results of the campus task force that came out this year. The amazing midweek mingle, which if you haven't been to, I highly recommend. It'll start up in the fall. The energy and the enthusiasm coming from our clergy and staff has been amazing. And even in the way that our boards are acting. The Board of Finance and Administration has been more forward-looking and has given us tools to look forward past that 1 to 5 year window in a way that we've never seen before, for instance. Personally, I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to serve. I will be stepping down, and if all of the votes go as planned, I will become a deacon again. I've personally learned a lot this year, both about myself, about the church, and what it means to be a spiritual community in 2023. I'm very, very grateful to pass I don't have a real gavel, but the figurative moderator's gavel over to Peter Eichten. He really brings deep church leadership knowledge, and he has an amazing commitment to the radical teachings of Jesus. He also has more time than I do, I hope. I'm gonna pass the mic over to Eric Olson, the chair of the Leadership Council, next. But as I do that, I want to go back to what's in the back of the bulletin and give you an action item as a congregation. Give us an action item. Please think about what's important to you about Plymouth. Think about what you want to become, and what does church mean to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jay. Good afternoon, everybody. For those of you who don't know, Leadership Council is kind of a misunderstood or a poorly understood organization in our church. And I just let you know that it consists of the chair-elect, the secretary, the board chairs of the 6 church boards, the co-chairs of the Racial Justice Initiative, the archivist, and the 3 clergy members. So it's all of us that meet every month and talk about what I would call operational matters of the church. This year, unlike some previous years, we did not have to wrestle with any large, controversial questions that were at issue with the church. And what that gave everybody the time to focus on in those meetings was what was actually going on in the church and all the things that Dwayne and Jay have talked about and that are contained in the reports. And I just have to say that all those folks, the board chairs, RJI co-chairs, archivists, did such wonderful work this year for Plymouth Church. You can read their reports, but I was in the room with them, and I just can't imagine a better set of leaders to have been a part of, so I'm so grateful for that. The only other thing that I really want to highlight from my report in the annual report is the marketing committee. The marketing committee had been the marketing task force, but everybody realized that we needed a robust ongoing marketing function. And it was decided that rather than report to one of the boards, that it would report to the Leadership Council because it has such an encompassing and important role in the church. And that group did more with less than any group I can imagine. I want to call out the 7 members of that committee: Tim Brunel, Elizabeth Blanchette, Beverly Gores, Jill Hennison, Bonnie Yonda, Scott Stano, and Jean Tracy. I would commend you to their report that's linked in the annual report. Go on it and read it. It's remarkable the things that they're doing, and the things that they're doing are working. That we have new members that are a direct result of the focus and the work of the marketing group. But it helps when you're marketing something to have a great product to market. And that's what I believe we have here at Plymouth Church. So thank you very, very much for the opportunity to serve as Leadership Council Chair. And now I will introduce Chair-elect Elizabeth Glidden, who is the Chair of the Nominating Committee, for her report. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. So, yes, I had the pleasure of chairing the nominating committee this year with a wonderful group of committee members who dug in to this very important task. The nominating committee's role is specific. It is to identify and recommend leaders for the many leadership opportunities within Plymouth Church. And so we are very pleased to say that we have a full slate of recommendations, and we are thankful and excited for so many people stepping forward with their leadership. And so here it is, and it's online as well. So mine is a short report, but I want to end by being able to say a great thank you to those leaders who are stepping off this year, who have completed their term of service, because it is a commitment that we are so thankful for. And so if you will allow me to identify those that we want to thank for their service. Steve Caselius, Ryan French, Jen Glazer, Becca Norris, Mark Larson, Eric Olson, Barb Iverson, Jean Kennedy, Ann Seltz, Chloe Booth, Anna Detweiler, Gingy Ward, Rebecca Smith, Lisa Maitre. We are very thankful for your service.
Next on our agenda is our roll call of new 50-year members, deceased members, and our staff milestone. So, Beth, if you could join us.
It is always a privilege to stand before you during an annual meeting and lift up two very significant categories of folks to commend to you, to remember, to celebrate. First of all, we are so grateful for our amazing group of 50-year members. And each year we induct a new class of 50-year members. And this year, for the first time since 2019, we were finally able to gather our 50-year members in person for a celebratory luncheon and program. And it felt so good to be in the gallery with our tables filled of our 50-year members, and while we have announced each class every year, to finally have those classes together. It was really a beautiful morning, and I am grateful. 50 years is a long time to be in service to a faith community, and so I never take this category lightly. If you are a 50-year member, whether I'm recognizing you today or you have been a 50-year member for some years, please know how significant you are to this community. We have 145 50-year members, people who have been members of this church for 50 years or more, 145. Friends, that is 10% of our membership roll. It is an extremely important group of people, and I am grateful for their wisdom and their continued leadership. And I'm very happy to announce to you the class of the 50-year members for 2022. Sheila Bjorkland, Tamsin Brown, David Haftings, Janice Hardy, Cliff Johnson, Nancy Johnson, Wanda Johnson, Don Leavenworth, Joanne Leavenworth, Annie McFarlane, Jeff Paulson, Jay Pomeroy, and Judy Takkanen. Can we celebrate them once again? I give God thanks and praise for the beauty and bounty of our 50-year members. And I turn now to a more solemn moment, a significant list, a time for us to pay tribute to our new saints in light, those of Plymouth's community who have died in this last year. I will read their names, and then I will invite us into some silence and close with a prayer. I begin with 4 members who died actually in 2021 and whose names either we didn't know of at the time of the last annual meeting, or they were not on our list. And so I lift up Douglas Baker Sr., Margaret Odegaard, Ruth Steinley, and Mason Myers. And since our last annual meeting, we remember these saints. Barbara Bryan Spence, Dave Caldwell, Helen Conway, Howard Dixon, Barbara Flanagan, Barbara Hageland, Roger Hare, Jean Howell, Frank Jesse, Mary Jones, Carol Ann Joyce, Tom Keller, Paul Laderack, Neil Lubke, Anita Makar, Mary Lou Matheson, Jeff McCoy, Hans Melgard, Meg Nichols, Ron Palasari, Dan Peterson, Tim Sheehan, Jim Simonson, Madeline Tron, Dean Wahlberg, Joan Wickland. Let us remember in silence. Almighty God, you have been our dwelling place throughout all generations. You are our guardian in life and death. By you we were brought into being, and in your care and keeping we leave this life. We praise you for all your servants who have lived in faith and discipleship and are now at rest with you. Especially this day, we give thanks for those in our community who have died this year. May each name encourage a plethora of memories as we continue to grieve those with whom we have traveled this road of faith. We thank you for their gifts by nature and by grace, which made each person unique and a distinctive presence in this congregation. May their legacies of faith, dedication, and perseverance continue to inspire us as we move forward in the work of the gospel. May their courage in both life and in death be a guiding force in our lives. Holy Spirit, who guides us through all of life, be our peace in the mystery of death. Grant us your comforting presence so that we understand death to not be defeat, but a meeting with the God we love and a renewed knowing of those who have already entered into the great mystery. Holy One, we give you thanks for these saints in light. Amen.
Good afternoon, all. It is my joy to be able to talk about our staff for a moment. and we have a few staff milestones. We have a robust staff here, not in numbers necessarily, but in love, care, and commitment. And I am grateful for all. We are grateful for all. So thank you to all who work here. In the last couple months, we have said goodbye to 4 people who have all moved on to other things, and I'd like to acknowledge them and thank them publicly for what they've done. Eric Kvasnica, our bell director, Siri Keller, our youth choir director, Chris Bonhoff, our digital ministry specialist, and Hannah Campbell Gustafson, our outreach coordinator, have all said goodbye to move on to things that were pulling them in other directions. So thank you to the 4 of them. One of which is sitting in this room, so he heard it. We also have some milestones, and we typically define our milestones by, like many places, those who have been here for long enough to be on a 5 or a 0. And they're also listed in the annual report. So this year we congratulate Dan Dressen on 45 years of being a soloist. I'm told he was a child prodigy when he started at the age of 6. 35 years for Maria Jetty. And 20 years for Lisa Drew. Our soloists seem to have been hired on a pattern in every 5 years. We also, upcoming in November, we will, Larry Johnson, our drop-in coordinator, will be here for 15 years. Now, there's a misprint in the annual report. Nina Johnson has not been in her current position here for 10 years. It has been 5 years. Still remarkable. Nina, it might feel like you've been here for 10 years, but it has been 5. I know she's watching over there. So let us thank Nina for her 5 years. You got whoops. And upcoming in September, in our jazz trio, our bassist Chris Bates and our percussionist Dave Schmallenberger will both be here for 5 years pretty soon. Well, thank you to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Seth. Next order of business is to move on to our action items. And I'll introduce Mike McAllister, our treasurer, and he deserves a hearty thank you, round of applause. The generation of the budget, the preparation, and the work that goes into this is, it's not small, and Mike has done it with grace, and I feel a lot smarter when I get to hear from him. So here's Mike.
Well, thank you. As mentioned, my name is Mike McAllister, and I am currently serving as the treasurer and a deacon. This is my second year in both capacities. But I would be tremendously remiss if I took too much credit for the budget. The budget, this is Plymouth's proposed budget. It reflects the work, diligent work of Dwayne Johnson from his leadership, and Gustafson for tremendous amount of detailed work going through the specifics and doing the best to get an idea of what the future holds. It is the result of careful scrutiny and vigorous debate in the Board of Finance and Administration. It shares inspiration and oversight from the deacons, And it is the work of all of us, and we've done our best to try to make it representative of what we believe is right for Plymouth. So to open, since this is kind of a formal action item, I just wanted to take a moment and actually make a motion that we approve the first half fiscal year 2024 operating budget as presented in the annual report and associated materials distributed in conjunction with this meeting. Is there a second? Second? Okay. So at this point, I think we are in order to proceed with kind of an overview of the budget, and I wanted to invite Annette up to speak, say a few words on behalf of the deacons.
I'm Annette Atkins. I'm clerk. I'm also on the deacons, and I should be standing with all of the deacons up here. So I'm going to be reading a statement that we've circulated among all the deacons. So it's not my words, it's our collective words. Last Sunday, the deacons held 2 conversations on the 2024 budget, a budget discussion without numbers, which I will say for me is one of my favorite kinds of discussions. Yeah. Over 100 of you participated. Thank you so much. We're convening similar conversations between now and November. The next one is June 21st. So we invite you to come for the midweek mingle, have dinner, and then stay and have a similar kind of soulful conversation about the budget. We want to talk to each other about the budget as moral documents and budget decisions as spiritual work. We are a wealthy congregation in money and in property and in the gifts and talents that all of you bring to Plymouth. So we have great abundance. Even so, like many mainline churches, we're experiencing a decline in membership and income. We are not in crisis, but we are facing a challenge. The deacons propose to take this challenge as an opportunity to think together about how we want to be church in the 21st century. A lot of that work has already been started by many members of Plymouth Church. The Growth Task Force, for example, has sparked energy and growth. The Racial Justice Initiative is stirring us to think and act around issues of race. The Climate and Environmental Justice Committee is calling on us to reckon with climate change. And the Campus Task Force has recently released its inspiring vision for reimagining our relationship to our neighbors. These and other groups within Plymouth are challenging us to think boldly and creatively about who we are as church and who we want to be. We believe there's a direct connection between Plymouth's commitment to these ideas and how we deal with our wealth. What do Christian stewardship and our faith call on us to do and to be? The conversations of the next 6 months are directed toward the thoughtful and soulful preparation of a budget for the 2024 calendar year. The actual budget work will be being done by Dwayne, by Mike McAllister, by Ann Gustafson, and the Board of Finance and Administration. And we hope that that work will be informed and shaped by the conversations. So we see these as threaded conversations moving forward. We are working out a longer range plan that will invite Plymouth members to do the transformational work that keeps a church vital and alive and meaningful. The various task forces will help inspire and guide and push us. Your participation is vital. This week at Plymouth Email lists the dates of the first phase of these conversations through November. One of the dates is wrong, but we'll correct that. The deacons feel that the time is now for us to discern as a community how we will move as Plymouth into the future. The Spirit is already moving among us. Let's keep moving.
Thank you, Annette. So in order to make sure that we've got the financial message out, the details that support the budget that's presented in the annual report, I'm going to take us through a brief set of slides today to kind of give a little bit of context to this. This is material that we shared in greater depth during the budget information sessions that took place on May 31st and June 1st. I'm trying to understand my audience. I figure that if you were really interested in going through this material at great depth, you would have probably attended that session. So this one I'm proposing to be a little bit lighter and not go through the content in such a degree. But this is, as Annette mentioned, a budget is a moral document, and it also is a sign of the health of our institution. And so there are certain messages that I think it is incumbent upon all of us to understand as we review and hopefully approve this budget. So with that said, let me take a moment and get a screen share up. Okay. So, to take us through the content, I want to take a little bit of time today to share a little bit about the financial context that Plymouth finds ourselves in, to talk a little bit about the philosophy that's going into the budget, and then we'll get into the actual numbers themselves. I understand the screen is small and far away from many of you. The material that we're actually voting on is the budget that is presented in tabular form in the annual report, I think on pages 33 and 34 or thereabouts in the annual report document. But let's take a moment and talk a little bit about the context that Plymouth finds ourselves in. Now, this is a slide that we shared with the deacons and with the Board of Finance and Administration in our April meeting. It includes a forecast for where we are in our current fiscal year. That's the year we are operating in right now. And it projects forward for the period of 3 months, and it looks backwards, of course, across a period of 9 months. And it covers kind of our best forecasting of where we feel like we're going to end up this fiscal year. I wanted to share this in the context of asking you to approve a budget for the next fiscal year, because I think this slide summarizes the challenge that we face right now. When we look at what our income was for where we are from a perspective, where we are versus where we planned to be, we are about $160,000 short of what we had hoped to be at in the course of FY23. Now, these are numbers that are as of the end of March. There has been, word has been getting out. There have been appeals for people to respond. There have been invitations for people to respond. And I am encouraged to say that there is positive response. There are, I'd say, unforecasted donations that are being made, but there's still work to be done. And so, as best as we kind of understand right now, we are falling short on the income side. Also, taking a look at the expense line, this year has been challenging on the expense side of the ledger as well. We have had greater expenses than we had expected in some line items, and we have had, and we've been working to kind of manage those expenses. In summary, this leaves us about $160,000 short on the expense side as well. So in aggregate, we're about $327,000 behind where we wanted to be in a budget perspective when we close this fiscal year. Now, similar on the income side, work is being done on the expense side to try to affect the expenses that can be affected and to bring us in closer to the budget. And while this slide doesn't depict progress since the end of March, there has been progress. We are seeing some closing of that gap. But I want the congregation to process these numbers and understand that when we talk about, if you have been close to the debates, you'll hear people talking about crisis and challenge and what are we going to do. And what I want to convey in this presentation today is that we have work to do. We have a challenge in front of us. That said, I want you to understand those numbers in the context of Plymouth's overall position. Plymouth is, as mentioned, a wealthy church. We are in an enviable position compared to many of our peers in that we have a large amount of money in investments that are held by the church. So approximately $7 million of investments as of the, I think actually this number fluctuates up and down based on how the market is doing. But the most recent numbers, I think shared in the Gift and Gratitude report in the Friday email, shows that we have a little bit over $7 million as of end of the last month. We also are the beneficiaries of this amazing piece of property and the land on which it sits and the buildings that we are in right now. The most recent assessed value of that property is on the order of $8 million. So I want you to understand the challenges that we have in our operating budget in the context of a greater overall wealth. It doesn't diminish the challenge that we face. It doesn't mean we can ignore it and that we don't have work to do. But I want people to appreciate that the challenge is in the context of a bigger picture. We are not, I believe, and this is me speaking, I do not believe we are in a crisis. Now, the challenges, just to continue painting the picture of the context, while we do have wealth, we also have great demands on that wealth. So looking at this $8 million building, there are certainly parts of it that were built quite a long time ago. There are major systems and components of this building that are in need of maintenance and repair. And we forecast that we could easily spend $1 to $2 million over the coming few years to make sure that this building stays sound, that the mechanicals stay functional, and that it continues to serve all the needs and the uses that we put it to. And then as well, when we talk about the context of where we're going to be ending FY23, when we talk about an imbalance on the income and the expense side, the way that imbalance is addressed is it comes from this pool of investments. So that's what we commonly refer to as a draw. And we know that there's several different ways you can look at a draw. The simplest way to think about it, in my mind, is to recognize that you have to be, if you are taking out more than your investments are earning or that you are depositing each year, then that balance will go down. So if the balance goes down, we have less in the future. We have less to take care of the building with. And so these metrics, as treasurer, give us reason to be cognizant of the choices we're making and what we should do about them. So in that context, as we develop the budget through the course of this year, I'm sorry, let me take one moment. One other piece of financial context is, as was mentioned, Plymouth operates in a context as a mainline church. Mainline church membership has been declining year over year for decades. Giving has also been going down. Now, Plymouth is a beneficiary of, I would say, some counter elements to that trend. While membership has been going down, while fewer people are giving, the people that are giving are continuing to give more. And I want to thank all of you as the congregation that makes this possible for your reactions to the asks from Plymouth to increase your gifts. Between those two elements, between a declining membership year over year and increased giving year over year, Plymouth is still down, but it is not anywhere near down, as far down as could be if we were not seeing the congregation react in the way that it has. So with those elements, kind of painting the big picture of the financial context, looking at the budget, we are here today proposing a 6-month budget. The reason that we are proposing a 6-month budget is effectively that as we took our best effort to forecast what the income would look like in the coming calendar year, as we looked at what our present expenses would require, there was a lot of discomfort from the people that were closest to those numbers. The discomfort that in order to bring those two elements into balance as we would like to be able to balance them, it would require dramatic changes. And we felt like those were changes that that the congregation was not involved in discussing, had not been involved in imagining, had not been, if we had brought here today a 12-month budget with significant cuts that would bring the income, the predicted income and the predicted expenses into balance, I feel that the congregation would feel like, would be scratching their heads trying to understand what had happened. Would feel like you were surprised by the proposed budget. Would feel like the budget had happened behind the scenes without adequate input or support. And so we are presenting the 6-month budget today because, as Annette mentioned, the deacons recognize that this is a congregation, and we feel like to do right by that congregation and to give the congregation a chance to understand, to think about, to provide input, to help build the story of what's going to happen next. We need time and engagement activities to bring the congregation along, and to be able to take that input and bring it forward in a future special meeting to basically fill in the budget that comes after December of this year. So that's the context, and I think the important thing I would call your attention to is, again, the fact that we are bringing forward a 6-month budget is a recognition, it's a direct recognition of the challenge that we face. And it is an act to give the congregation a chance to understand and react to that, and to help us talk about what do we do on that basis. So with that said, I think the numbers that are here on the screen are the ones that you can see in the annual report. Just to call if you haven't seen this document before, I want to call your attention to one thing. What we are asking to approve today is the rightmost column on this page. So that is the FY24 first half budget, basically covering the 6-month period from July 1st through December 31st. The other 2 columns are presented for context, for comparison. So the leftmost column is the FY23 budget that we are currently operating under until the end of June, until the end of the present month. The middle column is showing kind of an equivalent 6-month period from the current fiscal year. So while the proposed budget covers July to December of 2023, the middle column shows what we actually spent or received during that same period, July to December of 2022. So with that said, you see here on this slide the revenue side. I'll take a couple of moments and just speak to kind of the work that we've put into this budget. When we're projecting kind of our single greatest line item of income is giving income. When we make that projection, we feel pretty confident in it because we have taken a look at actual pledges. We've taken a look at the history of actual givers to Plymouth. We have a great deal of kind of basis for this number. It's not simply plucked as a wish or a hope. There's a lot of kind of information that's gone into that number. Other income includes leases, rentals, fees paid to us for the use of the building. We feel confident in that number as well because it comes from business relationships that Plymouth has. And then when we look at the transfers section, what I'll call your attention to is the first 2 line items. The first line item is what we would refer to as it's a 4% draw. If you hear us talk about draws for 4% or less, those draws are considered kind of unexceptional. It's the number that we use as a benchmark in our governing policies. What we are proposing for the first 6-month period of this year is to use basically an 8% draw, which is those first 2 line items. That annualized draw would be 8%, basically half of. We're talking about 4%, but only within a 6-month period, making it 8% if we were to double it across the full year. So those are the line items that are the basis for the draws. So it is a higher draw than we're comfortable with on a long-term, ongoing basis. But we feel like it is a prudent draw for the 6-month period to give us time to discuss and discern what comes next. On the expense side, I can say that these expenses as well, same 3 columns, same three column layout. Where you notice kind of differences between the different numbers, the numbers that we had the most confidence in are the present numbers, are the proposed numbers for the budget. They reflect as our best figuring of the projected expenses during the first 6 months of this year. And we show I think that's, I don't know if there's anything in particular to call out here, except maybe one note that's worth paying attention to is the non-capitalized building expenses. We are continuing to try to hold that at a minimal level, which means putting off some of the maintenance in the building on the basis that we're trying to preserve the programming and the other activities that the budget represents. One thing I'll close with. Okay, so sorry, Dwayne called my attention to the community fund line item as well. That bears mentioning. The community line item is where Plymouth reflects our gifts to other organizations. Community fund spending is normally very backloaded within the course of a calendar year. So normally, in the FY23 period, for example, we had allocated $95,000 in our budget for the community fund over the course of that full year period. The spending pattern for that money is very much backloaded. Most checks go out in the May to June timeframe. What we show in the community fund line item here is about $10,000, which reflects, it's a similar amount to what was spent in the course of fiscal year 23, so in the course of the last year. And it reflects one organization that we want to make a payment to in the course of this early, in the first half of this fiscal year. Now that said, I think it's worth understanding that, like I said, these expenses are not just evenly, we didn't take a full year period and simply cut it in half. They do reflect when the spending is likely to occur. And so right now, if we want to maintain the community funding spending, when we get to the next budget that we'll consider in a future special meeting, this is a significant element of spending, and it's an element that Plymouth has some discretion over. So for those, what I'd call your attention to is that is, I know, of great significance to many people and concern. And so again, pay attention to these budgets, participate in these sessions, because this does reflect what Plymouth does, our ministry in the community, and our partnerships with organizations that we hold dear. I'll close with just a comment on capital expenditures. We are not bringing forward a capital expense budget for approval in this 6-month period. The work that it would take to prepare for capital projects is significant, and it draws on the same operational resources that are currently supporting the transition between accounting approaches, that have been supporting the effort to prepare this budget, and that are going to be supporting, enabling us in the congregation with financial data and information that's going to be used in this forthcoming 6-month period. So at the moment, we don't believe that we are in a position, simply from a capacity perspective, to bring forward capital expense budget in the course of this year. We did bring that forward last year. I wanted to make sure that it was kind of, people were aware that at the moment we're not proposing that for discussion or decision during this meeting today. So with that, I've kind of made my presentation sharing the context on the budget. I think we're probably in order to open questions or debate.
Thank you, Mike. Is there any, are there any comments or discussion online?
Nothing yet, but I would
Nothing
give
yet.
people a moment to type.
Sounds good. Anyone in the room? Yes, please. Please come up and use the microphone.
Hi, I'm Bonnie Yanda. I have a comment and a question. I hope that a kind of systematic planning for capital improvements will be instituted in the near future. I recall under Karen Hartz, we had that maybe over a 5-year period, and it gave me some comfort to know that things were planned and carried through on. And my question is, what were our commingled investments return? What did they return in the past 6 months or 12 months, whatever you have? Either as a percentage or a dollar amount.
I'll let Mike answer both those, but we are working on that capitalized budget.
Yeah, trying to address the question, I actually don't, so I don't have a number at my fingertips that I can respond to the question. There are some complications in that because while the market has been flat or down over the last roughly year period, Plymouth also received a very large bequest in that same period as well. We received about $680,000. So looking at the numbers that I had in the deck, we are at about the balance was at about $8 million at the end of 2022, or sorry, 2021. Looking at the end of 22, we are at about $7 million, but that reflects both a market decline and a large bequest as well.
Next question. Nancy, I think I saw your hand up first, so if you want to come up. Yes.
Jay, we have one online.
Okay. One there next.
Hi, I'm Beverly Gores, and I just want some clarification. I know one of the biggest expenses is labor, staff, and it was reported that 4 people are no longer on the staff, and 1 person came on. So my question is, A, were they full-time or part-time? And B, are they going to be replaced? Because that would help the expenses go down, but we may need them. And I can't remember what roles they played. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Beverly.
So the question, the employees that departed, there were 2 full-time employees. Actually, no, I'm sorry, is that? Actually, all 4 employees were part-time. Sorry, thank you for the clarification. So all 4 employees are part-time. In the proposed budget, we reflect holding those roles open for the 6-month period. So we've effectively worked to reduce the cost of salaries by that decision, but we've done so without taking any staff action. Plymouth has not separated anybody from the organization of the institution. Now, one other element that's in the budget that's worth probably calling attention to from a salaries and staff perspective, the budget does reflect a decision to rest the building for 1 day a week on Mondays. And that is a cost-saving measure. And the way that we expect that cost-saving measure is going to be, some of the cost savings is going to come about, is from having fewer janitors, fewer security hours, basically used to support a building usage on a day that it's in rest. We're looking at effectively going to a skeleton crew for that 1 day a week. So that's going to be that's a kind of a cost savings measure as well. It will likely have impact on present employees depending on how that work gets split up.
Thank you. Next question, gentleman in blue.
My name is Don Doberstein, and my question is more logistical. And unfortunately, I was not able to attend either of the meetings at the beginning of June that talked in specifics about the budget. But I've been a member for almost 12 years, and I've always found it somewhat disconcerting, I guess, that the discrepancy in the calendar between the pledge year and the calendar year. And looking at this 6-month budget proposal, would that allow us to bring those 2 closer in line? Because it just seems as if trying to budget with that calendar discrepancy is difficult at best.
Hear, hear. Great question.
I'll say your confusion is appreciated and shared broadly. And we have thought of that possibility. So there is some discussion, there is some investigation, I'll say, some figuring out about the potential of realigning our fiscal year with the calendar year and with the giving year. I see a lot of heads nodding, which makes me think that that's potentially going to be positive. So it's certainly being given a great consideration.
Thank you.
And from staff perspective, that's one of the selling points for the 6-month budget also. If we, in this conversation, we will hear and get you to register with us, that will be our opportunity, since we're going to be presenting a budget at the end of that 6-month period. Then we can, in effect, almost by the nature of that budget, give you a calendar year budget and go to a calendar year cycle.
We've got a couple questions online, so Seth, if you can read them.
Yes, we have a comment from Mitch Thompson that says, "Thanks to Mike McAllister for all of your hard work." Let's read that as an important thing to remember. And then we have a hand raised to speak aloud. Cody, can you please let Dobby speak? Muted. Dobby.
Thank you for taking my question. I would like to just, can you hear me?
Cody, it looks like the microphone is indicating something, but we can't hear him. Dobby, we can't hear you right now, please.
Can you hear me now?
Thank you.
Can you hear me? It seems that when I can hear you, you can't hear me.
Folks at home, with the system we have today, we can't make an easy back and forth comments and conversation. So when the people at the front give a thumbs up, you're clear to speak. I can't have both channels on at the same time. Dobby, just give me 5 seconds to walk to the back of the room, and Seth will give you a thumbs up and you can speak and trust that we can hear you. Thanks.
Thank you, Cody.
Okay, thank you. And a special thanks to Cody for dealing with all this technology. I appreciate it. I want to just briefly explain why, as a member of the Board of Finance and Administration, and just one member and speaking for myself, I am not able to support this budget. My explanation goes back at when the Board of Finance and Administration recommended the fiscal 23 budget, the budget that we're currently operating under, to the deacons. We passed a resolution that indicated that the level of withdrawal from the commingled investments was at an unsustainable level. And one of the things that we recommended was that a task force be set up to prepare a 10-year financial plan to look at the long-term impact of the withdrawals from the commingled investments. While that plan has not yet been totally completed because it does not yet include capital investments that are necessary, and it only includes the operating expenses. It also demonstrated very clearly that the level of withdrawal from the commingled investments would eliminate over time or having any of those assets. And we are, as Mike said, very fortunate that we have a nice nest egg to rely on to provide us with income for the church each year. That nest egg was established by prior generations of Plymouth members who gave to the church more money than the church needed to spend at that point in time. And that's how we have accumulated these additional assets that we are very lucky to have. And we must, in my view, pass on those assets and that benefit to future members of Plymouth Church, just as we have been the lucky recipients of them. And so while we do have this nest egg, I do believe that we have to be very careful and not to waste it. And as Mike indicated, in fiscal 23, the current fiscal year, we will withdraw from those commingled investments approximately $700,000. Now, that's essentially 10%. I think 10% is actually the number that is in the slide that Mike showed all of us. That's about $400,000, a little over $400,000 more than what the 4% draw would be. The 4% draw is in our governing documents. It can be waived by the deacons, as they have done routinely. But it does mean that we are overdrawing from the commingled investments. And I want to point out that that means, and that is in a year where we have had no capital investment in the building. Historically, we have spent at least $200,000 a year on capital investments for the building. We did not do anything in fiscal 23. There's a proposal that we do nothing for the first half of fiscal 24. Those items that would have that money spent on them have not gone away. They've just been deferred over and over again. And in addition, as Mike alluded to, we have two major projects that we have been deferring longer than we should have, and we are at the point where we can really no longer defer them. And that those two alone will cost at least $1.5 million. So if we make up for the last couple of years where we didn't spend anything, we will be spending over $2 million. The only source that we have for that money are the commingled investments. So our total of $7 million of commingled investments, less a couple million for capital expenses, less $700,000 for this year's deficit, less who knows what will be in fiscal 24, but we're talking about an 8% draw, the equivalent of an 8% draw for the first 6 months. So we have a significant issue here. And I just want to put it in terms of, if we try to make it up with contributions from the congregation, we have a dwindling number of people who contribute. And while they have been contributing more, which is great, we're talking about, just to make up the $400,000 extra for fiscal 23, we would have to increase our annual giving by about 25%. If we include a couple $100,000 for capital expenses, which we normally have done, we would be up to almost 35%. So it is not possible for this congregation to make up for our expenses in any substantial way through contributions from the congregation. We need to very seriously look at reduction of expenses. And so while the proposed budget for the first half of fiscal '24 or for the first 6 months says does reduce some expenses. And I think that's a good start, but it is nowhere near enough. The 4 positions that were talked about just recently, those positions have not been eliminated. We're simply talking about not filling them. And while this conversation is going on with the congregation. But I do think that we need to really take a stand. We have been pushing off this decision to make significant cuts for quite a few years now. And it's time, the effort and the cuts made in this budget are just not sufficient for me to support the budget. Thank you.
Cody, can you bring it back to us? Okay. Thank you, Dobby. I want to thank you for pointing out a lot of the, I guess, summarizing a lot of what Mike showed in his numbers. You make a very strong case, I believe, as a deacon, for the discernment that we're asking the congregation to go through over the next 6 months. So thank you for that. We've got a couple more questions in the room. We have one more online. Let's start the next. I'm just going with whose hand I saw.
We went to the same high school, so I can give him a hard time. Hi, everybody. My name is Gina Del Corazon. I am a 1-week new member. Thank you. Thank you. And I am really, my life has been fundamentally changed by this institution and this community in the last year. And I think that both I was needing different things and I was able to bring different things this year than at any other point in my life, in part because I needed to relearn how to be in community. And I think that Plymouth has offered me opportunities to do that, and to the point where I am offering to serve in leadership here, in part because of the challenges we're facing right now. Because I believe strongly that if there is a community that I think is important, that I have to step up and contribute in all the ways that I can. And I have more energy than money as a solo earning family right now, but got a wife in seminary, ministry, real moneymaker. But I think that there are times that we need to bank on growth and future that requires taking a risk and a leap of faith. And I think that there are things that we could not undo if we took a very hardline, austere approach immediately. I also think that this institution should live in perpetuity. I want Plymouth to be here, to be healthy and available, and to be able to give and change the neighborhood around it, the city around it, the world around it, when my son is 41 years old. And I think that to do that, we have to be careful and thoughtful and collective in our decision making. And I think it is harder, it is slower, it is messier to do things together as a large group, as a congregation, but we are also in the Congregationalist tradition that has opted in to the messiness of congregational life and opted in explicitly to the community work together. And I think that a few weeks ago, Reverend Beth preached about the early church and that vision of everybody bringing what they had and everybody taking what they needed. And that is so countercultural to the world that we live in today. And it is more important than ever that we work through the messiness together to think about, what do we do with this immense privilege? What do we do with the immense challenges ahead of us? Who are we going to be, and how are we going to make sure that we individually contribute all of our time, talent, and treasures that we can to make that happen? And so doing this over the next 6 months is intimidating and tremendously exciting. And so we need to think about, I am strongly in support of giving us that time to be intentional about how we do this together. And there's going to be trade-offs, and it's going to be hard. There will be lament, and there will be praise, joy, the good stuff. But that is part of life, and that is part of life together. And so I am in favor of this 6-month period for us to work hard together to make these decisions. Thank you.
Thank you, Gina. Let's do one more online before we go back to the room.
All right, it's a two-part question from Sue Moses. Mike, it's particular to numbers, so I'm guessing looking at the annual report online. Could you explain the $142,150 number further? It says 4% of commingled investments, but 4% of $7 million is $280,000. So she's missing something. Thanks for all your work. Followed up by, also, where does it show $700,000 on the attachments? She sees 283K, 99K equals 382, not 700.
Okay, I'll do my best to try to respond to the numbers. So I think the first question is about how do we get to the number that we call the 4% draw. So the way that we get to the 4% draw is fairly complicated. It is not simply taking the present year balance and dividing it and dividing by 4%. Our governing policies have a more complicated formula. One element is that instead of taking the present balance, we take a 36-month running average of balances. That serves the purpose of smoothing out highs and lows so that we aren't excessively influenced by the immediate moment in time. So there is a spreadsheet that Ann and I have looked at that basically includes those closing 36-month balances as one element of the basis. Oh, okay. Yeah. So from the room, I'm getting some coaching. Maybe Sue's question was easier than I'm letting on to. If we're looking for, we're saying 4% of the annual amount would be 280,000 approximately. If we're taking 8%, we're doubling that. But because we're looking at a 6-month period, we're halving it again. So it's a little bit confusing in that respect. Now, the other question that was asked was about the $700,000 figure. This number isn't, I don't know that I presented this well in the slide, but what we're talking about here is we're looking at what we budgeted for FY23 in terms of a draw was about a 5.4% draw. There is two elements to that. There's about a $280,000 4% amount. It was about the same last year as it is this year. So there's $280,000 budgeted as the 4% draw last year. Then also last year we added $100,000 of incremental draw above and beyond that. So roughly we were at about $380,000 of a draw between those with what was budgeted. Now you take the $380,000 and you add the additional amount necessary to close the gap that I mentioned, and that's where you add $320,000 and $380,000, and you should get about $700,000. That, I think, is the number that Dabi was speaking to. Now, that number is somewhat complicated, again, because in the balances, we've already taken some of that spend in the earlier part of this year, but let's pull back from the details. $700,000 as an annual draw is a challenging number. Now, that's based on estimates. We might close that gap. I think, again, as mentioned earlier, some people have been changing the timing of their giving. Some people have been increasing their giving. That $700,000 is a projection, and we should be able to close the year soon and see what the actual number is. But it's a number that the congregation should be aware of because at a sustained level, that's an unsustainable amount.
And I just want to add to that because I want to tell you what that is, because this also argues for making sure that you don't take too much of a draw because you also want to reserve for the things that you did not plan for. And there are some big numbers that we did not plan for. What we did not plan for, what it would cost to do a major transition in our financial accounting systems and to upgrade our software. That's additional dollars that we incurred when we decide to make those transitions. And the other, I think one of the single largest growing but unbudgeted item is for security. The neighborhood around us took a different turn in the last couple of years. And we had to do a combination of hiring more security and the security that we could not hire in terms of human resources, we had to augment with virtual resources, so that we then invested in cameras and audio surveillance systems because of the increase in crime. So again, even the idea of keeping the draw very low, because you might encounter in that year some unforeseen costs that you can go to your, quote, reserves to support.
Matt, please.
Hi, thanks. My name is Matt Thomas. Just wanted to address anybody's concerns about the building. I've been involved with the Buildings and Grounds team for about 10 years. And in the last year or so, I've really taken a deep dive into understanding the building. It's complicated. So if anybody can navigate their way around the entire place, it's you know your stuff. I would say though that in terms of the 10-year plan, we've been making efforts to establish what the capital costs are going to be in terms of maintenance. And there's different categories too. There's small things that need to be taken care of on a regular basis, and then there's giant mechanical units that last for 50 years that come upon us. And so there's a real mix of expenditures that we have to confront. And I guess in my work and in my role here, I'm invested in making the building a sound place. And our priority has always been water tightness. I see Ed Curtis in the audience, and I just know that if you let water in, you're in trouble. So there are some of those things that we're really mindful of. And so just be assured that we're paying attention to it and understanding what our priorities are. A zero budget item for building maintenance is not a sustainable thing. We understand that. But I also understand that a building is used for people. And so the programs and the clergy and the staff are here to foster our growth in our personal lives and in our life of faith, whatever that means to us individually. And the building's a place where we can gather, but the church is not about the building solely. So we'll take care of both, the people and the building. But in the 6 months, I'd like to just focus on the people, and then we can discern what the priority is for the building and how we all work together. Thank you.
Another online comment or question?
Yes, we have a question from Jean Thompson. I believe she says, I believe Dobby West is a member of the Long Range Financial Planning Committee, and I believe that's true. Will there be a final report from the committee that will inform their ongoing discernment, or our ongoing discernment? There was a report?
I'll repeat what Becca is saying. There was a report that was shared in December, and the ultimate output of that long-term financial planning committee was to build a modeling tool so that we could take real numbers and our actual history and project forward using various assumptions to test out where and when our finances would move. But Mike, if you want to.
I think Jay actually spoke pretty well to it. The long-term financial committee effort on the Board of Finance and Administration was to create a tool. And we used that tool to run through a few scenarios. And those scenarios were shared with the deacons and with BOFA. But the scenarios, as I see it, the inputs for all of this are changing. Over the next 6 months, as we make choices, as we get direction, I expect that we will use that tool to take a new look at what direction and what course we're on at that point. So I don't think there will ever be a final, I hope there's never going to be a final 10-year view. It'll simply be an updated one.
Nancy. Oh. You're next, I promise.
Cutting in line, Carl Jones. Just a question which you partially addressed, probably. Two-part question. boards and programs are doubling, so I was just wanted a brief explanation as to why that would be. And it sounds like what your comments about the security system may explain why we have such a significant increase in administration and operations. If there's anything more to say about that, I'd be appreciated.
So one thing I'll say about, the question was about boards and programs doubling. I think that's an artifact of the way we account for some of the activity that's going on there. The transition in the accounting activities is giving us an opportunity to standardize and improve the way we book transactions, to where we book those transactions to, and the change in the line item is not an artifact of greater activity. It's simply an artifact of how that activity shows up in the forecasts and in the numbers. If anything, as mentioned, right, there's been great effort to control expenses wherever possible, and so the numbers, if anything, do so reflect a very tight kind of rein on activities there. And I think a similar element goes for the other question about the other line items. There's been increases in building security. There's going to be some expenses on the accounting and accounting activities around outsourced kind of accounting, around outsourced payroll. But the forecast is a reflection of where the costs are going right now, not a dramatic change in activity.
Nancy.
Hey, Annette. I'm Nancy Gores. I'm not my sister Beverly. Just want to, it's okay, I love her. We look a lot alike the more older we get. I support this approach. I think it's wise, and I want to get to know Gina even more. I'm so looking forward to that. I do want to ask, though, as we look forward in the next 6 months of study, that perhaps we can get more data, a 10-year perhaps chart that would show us how much we've had in our investment funds, what we've budgeted to take out, what we've actually taken out, so that we can see more than 1 or 2 years and get a broad sense of and then talk about how much of an endowment or investment funds do we need, what do we need to use for the church, and have a larger context for that conversation. I've looked at a little bit of a 10-year stretch that sort of stopped in fiscal 21. And over that 10-year, my memory is we sometimes budgeted more, we sometimes took less. On average, we were maybe 5 to 6%, but some years we took nothing. A year or two, we took 8 or 10%. I mean, there's a range as a church deals with reality and the forces that are at play. So I don't want to do the drastic thing because we're suddenly scared and hurt the long-term growth of the church. So I totally support this approach. I'm very grateful for the wise leaders that have brought us to it, and for those who have raised a flag and say we need to look closer. Yes, let's look closer together. Thanks.
Thank you, Nancy. Any more questions online?
Just to Nancy, one of the things that we're so proud of, Nancy, and we're trying to probably do that, is if you've noticed in the weekly email, we're starting to put a generosity report. And give us that idea, because Ann really does try to answer some pressing question or question around the finances, and we'll take note of that, because we want to try to present that in a way that you can read in a simple chart or graph form. But we'll try to do that. So if you have any other ideas of what you would like to see, just drop us a note, because we're always trying to think what will give you more context or answer a certain question. So please take note of it every Friday. But if you want to see something, we'll try to see if we can get it in a short, very presentable way and include it in that generosity report every week.
And I think from a deacon standpoint, we've talked about transparency quite a bit, and so sometimes we're not in a small dinghy, we're in a big ship that it feels like sometimes it's hard to turn the ship quickly, but we are moving toward that as much as we can. And certainly we're a congregational church. This is our building, this is our money. These are our decisions. They are not limited to a certain group. Any other questions or comments in the room? If not, we will call the question. Okay. Everyone in the room and online. In the room, please raise your hands if you're in favor of adopting the budget put forth. We're taking a moment to count in the room here. What's up? You got a count?
So on this side, I had 38. I did not see a hand that was not raised.
$61. Okay, thank you. All opposed? Okay, we've got, I see one, thank you. 2? Okay. Motion passes. Oh, sorry. Online, my bad. I got excited there. Apologies. What's the count online?
28 yay, 4 nay.
Okay. I can't do that math that quickly in my head, but about 100 yay, 6 nay, I think. Now I can say the motion passes. Thank you, Flynn. Next item on the agenda. Can I get a motion for the election of our church leaders for the slate? So move. John, second from Elizabeth. Any discussion? We aren't going to go through all of the slate. It's in the annual report. Anyone have any questions, comments? Raised hand online. Is there?
Yeah, please.
I feel like the newscaster looking for which camera is active here. Okay, we'll call the question. All in favor, please raise your hands in the room and vote online. I mean, looking at the number of hands in the room, unless it's overwhelming online, I don't think they can be, the nays can win it. Thank you.
So far, it's 100% yay online.
Opposed? Thank you. It was 100% yay online, right? Motion passes. That ends the agenda of items. I need a motion to close the meeting, if anyone has it.
Move to adjourn.
Reverend Dr. Dwayne Davis moves to adjourn. Second from Lisa Maitre. All right. Thank you, everyone.